Welcome, my friends, to another edition of More Bad News, brought to you, as always, by Camel Cigarettes. Take the Camels Challenge, smoke Camels for 30 days, and see for yourself what a difference Camels can make in your life. And remember, folks, when doctors made house calls, more doctors smoked Camels than any other cigarette. Is that a coincidence? I think not. Well, my friends, it's been another week of very bad news, and I thought that I would play devil's advocate, but I think I'll take the horns off for the moment, uh, so as not to be distracted. Uh, and there were just incredible mood swings that I have been observing, from left to right. Uh, there's suddenly excitement and optimism, and there's confusion, and on the right, Nikki Haley is on Fox News saying we aren't going to win this by comparing crowd sizes. So I would recommend a little exercise for next week, a couple of times during the week. Compare Colbert's late night monologue with that of Greg Gutfeld. Now, if you can just YouTube search for Gutfeld. Gutfeld is Fox's answer to late night. He has a larger audience than Colbert, and he has a show that I would wager that it's really interesting. I mean, I think that people from one side wouldn't find anything about Colbert funny, and people from the other side wouldn't find anything about Gutfeld to be funny. But if you don't have the kishkas for that, I'll just remark that you won't find any of the fears or doubts that are being projected on the Trump campaign. Gutfeld is surrounded by a half dozen hosts. Some of them are visiting and some of them are regulars. And they all exude a confidence because they know that they are right. When the media portrays the conversation between Musk and Trump as a disaster, Gutfeld describes Musk as a man who sent satellites into space and whose technology allows crippled people to walk. I mean, he is a genius, one of the most creative. It just shows you, in other words, um, uh, what a white man can accomplish when he puts his mind to it. And then Trump was described as a man who he could be living off of his billions in retirement, and instead he's risking his life and taking a bullet for you for a job that he doesn't take pay for. This is true in the Middle East too. The Messianic extremists are more optimistic than ever before. I mean, you can feel the vibe. The Mashiach is on the way. We're going to nuke Iran, clear Gaza, and build a third temple on the ruins of the Dome of the Rock. I remember well the absolute faith that neo-Nazis always had in the future that they were sure belonged to them. It takes faith to be an extremist. From the balcony of one camp, one needs a telescope to see to the balcony of the other. But I never felt any more comfortable in one camp than in the other. I want you to know just, uh, I spent some time with people from the radical right, neo-Nazis. And there was something about them that I always felt comfortable with. Uh, you know, uh, this is from 1972, 73, Robert Depew. They knew that civilization was collapsing. Now, of course, it was because of the Jews, but never mind that. Uh, I always felt when I was around people from the radical right that we shared a perception that something was terribly, terribly wrong. It was our analysis of that was vastly different, but that shared feeling was there. Uh, so and when I was around liberals, I always felt alienated. And I think I mentioned before that I was highly disliked, as a professor. My colleagues didn't like me. I was not respected. and people on the campus. I know for a fact. Just to say, this is one of the this is Roger Pearson's Race, Intelligence, and Bias in Academia. It's a great book and written in 1991, and chapter 5, this is just chapter 5 in the copy. Chapter 7, excuse me, is Activist Lysenkoism: The Case of Barry Mehler. It's just, I mean, it's one of the crowning achievements or delights of my career has been for that Roger Pearson wrote a whole chapter about my case, and it's very clear that people on my campus were feeding him material, syllabi, speaking events. They knew who he was. They knew he was my enemy, and that's all they needed. Just So he wrote this piece, which I like to think of as the strange career of Barry Mehler. So I never felt comfortable around liberals any more than I felt around Nazis. I was a pretty alienated person. Now there were people who I did feel comfortable around. The people who were part of the political activist world that I belonged to, fighting for all kinds of different causes. But I can tell you, from one camp to another camp, people didn't even know what was going. It was just other worlds. So. I wanted to talk this week about the before times. It's been coming up a number of times this week. The before times, a sci-fi idea that has made its way into real life. The shorthand phrase for an era before a catastrophe has now become part of our pandemic vocabulary. That's according to the Wall Street Journal, the quote. So there's before COVID, there's before the internet, before awareness of the collapse. On Reddit, there was a boy had commented, that he was nostalgic for the time when you could still believe in capitalism and in the future. That he wishes he could go back. It's you're nostalgic for that naivete, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. So and Karen and I were talking about the before times when we would get on an Amtrak train and spend a weekend in Chicago, staying in a hotel, going to restaurants, going to museums, having a fabulous time. Nostalgia for a time when human beings weren't just vectors of disease and terrifying accomplices to our collective suicide. So there really was no before time for me. I mean, I've been actually pretty much a pessimist my life. And I guess that just ironically has put me into a better place. I mean, so maybe more able to deal with is it terrifying transition that we're making, because everything is, I mean, if you see, I recommend if you want to understand the kinds of transformations that can take place, I would recommend the Warsaw Ghetto Diaries. To show how people went from everything looked normal and you're a professor to suddenly you're in the Warsaw Ghetto, trying to pull together an archive to document your demise. Lots of helpful hints. And I'm telling you, I can tell you this, that smoking brought some relief. Um, as a general principle, we don't make corrections on the show. But last week I garbled the story about Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. I want you to know I used to tell my students that half the times I don't know what I'm talking about, and the other half of the time I'm lying. And your job is to figure out which is which. But you may have noticed if you've been watching this for a while that I don't go back and correct mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, and that's it. This show is not meant, yeah, this is not reliable news here. You shouldn't believe anything I say anyway. And I don't know why you're listening in the first place, but uh, I told the story, a garbled account of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, and then on Tisha B'av I studied the Gemara and I went over it, and it's a really interesting story, and I just wanted to end with this. So Kamsa uh, Bar Kamsa is the son. Bar means son, son of. I should have realized that right away. It's Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. The father is Kamsa and the son is Bar Kamsa, the son of Kamsa. And so you have a guy throwing a party, and he loves the father and hates the son. This is at a time when radicals are stirring up revolution and suicidal. I mean, these biryonim was what they were called. They burned the storehouses when the city of Jerusalem was being besieged. They burned the food in the city, because they thought, it would motivate people to fight harder. These people were absolutely nuts. So, the older generation. So you have this guy who loves Kamsa, the father, and he cannot stand Bar Kamsa, the son, who is one of these radicals. So he sends his servant to invite Kamsa to his party, and the servant goes to Kamsa's house. But Kamsa and his son, he knocks at the door, and Bar Kamsa, the son, opens the door, and the servant doesn't know anything. He just was sent to the house, so he invites the son. He says, "My master sent me to invite you to a party." So Bar Kamsa comes to the party. When this guy sees him, this unbelievable no good. His father is such a saint, and this kid is such a disgrace. He just can't. He just blood starts to boil, and so that begins this whole confrontation where he says, "You got to get out." And Bar Kamsa says, "I'm here already. Let me pay for my meal. Let me pay for half the party. Let me pay for the whole banquet. I'll pay for everything. Just don't humiliate me." And the guy just takes him, grabs him, and throws him out. Physically ejects him. And that is the reason for the destruction of the temple, which the rabbis interpret as it's a metaphor for people hating one another with no cause. But what do you mean there's no cause? So I I usually don't say anything about my audience, but my brother Ed watches the show every Sunday. Shout out to Ed. Uh, and I love my brother. It doesn't matter, that he is a Trump supporter. Um, it, it would be gratuitous hatred for me to hate him for his politics. That's the whole point of gratuitous hatreds. You don't, people are people that, everybody, we're all in this, we're on the same toboggan slide to hell. And it is gratuitous hatreds that the rabbis said were leading us towards our suicidal path of self-destruction. I'll leave it there. I hope it makes sense, and I'll see you again next week. Remember, take the Camels Challenge. It'll change your life.